In Mexico, President Andrés Manuel López Obrador said there will be no impunity in the case of the million-dollar fraud under the investigation within the Mexican food security system. In the United Kingdom, teachers announced that they will resume strike action for better pay on April 27th and May 2nd. Israeli forces shot 2 Palestinians dead on Monday in a raid into the occupied West Bank. Hello, welcome to From the South. I'm Luis Alberto Matos from the teleSUR studios in Havana, Cuba. We begin with the news. Mexican President Andrés Manuel López Obrador said there will be no impunity in the case of the million-dollar fraud under investigation within the Mexican food security system. During his regular morning press conference, the president announced that next week the Secretary of Civil Service, Roberto Salcedo, will report on the case with a detailed information about the embezzlement amount, with a strict respect of due process. The president emphasized that in the so-called SalgaMex case, arrest warrants have been issued and suspects already detained. López Obrador also informed that some judges have not wanted to issue arrest warrants because the group is protected by opposition parties.
In the SalgaMex case, arrest warrants have already been issued, and there are already detainees. And we will clarify, perhaps next week, how the fraud occurred, how much has been recovered, because you are already talking about 15 billion pesos. We will see how much the amount was, how much has been recovered, how much was really embezzled, who are the people responsible, how many arrest warrants have been issued, how many are already in prison, everything.
In this sense, President Andrés Manuel López Obrador took the opportunity to emphasize that during his government there will be no room for corruption and impunity for criminal acts.
Zero corruption. Zero impunity, not even for my brothers or my children. I was told to represent the people of Mexico and not to allow corruption.
On the other hand, the Mexican president said that the National Institute of Migration hired a private company for the security service at Ciudad Juárez station in Ciudad Juárez, since not all the required staff of the Federal Protection Service had been trained.
It was the Hidalgo and the state of Mexico's private police who guarded the government's offices. The private police were created and they expanded. So when we arrived, we said we were no longer going to use the private police. We're going to have a service that will provide office protection for everything that is needed.
In Mexico, the number of migrants killed in the recent fire at a temporary shelter in Ciudad Juárez rose to 40. The Federal Health Secretariat reports the death of one of the victims who died while being transferred to specialized health centers in Mexico City, along with 5 other patients. The military tragedy reportedly left 27 people injured, of which 23 are hospitalized. The Secretariat informed that the transfer of patients to Mexico's capital will continue due to the critical condition of some of the victims. Indigenous organizations hold President Guillermo Lasso responsible for the future increase in violence and social unrest in the country due to the control authorization of civilians to carry arms for self-defense. In a statement, the Confederation of Indigenous Nationalities, CONAI, warned of the rise of paramilitary groups and the assassination of indigenous and social leaders as well as human rights defenders. In the document, the indigenous group points out that the country has fallen into an abyss caused by a government incapable of fulfilling its obligation regarding security. CONAI also said the executive is not interested in tackling the causes of delinquency, such as the lack of employment and the lack of access to education and health. El Salvador's Ministry of Justice and Security said a total of 66,757 people have been arrested for alleged gang involvement. According to the government, the war against gangs, also known as maras, means that the Central American country has now achieved a sharp decrease in homicides during the first 3 months of the year. However, despite these results, human rights organizations have denounced the government's state of emergency as a way to allow arbitrary detentions by police forces. For its part, the Crystal Sol platform has said that gang youngsters continue to be one of the most stigmatized sectors of the population, since most of the complaints of these multilateral organizations are by people between 18 and 30 years. A study by the Brazilian NGO Transparência Brasil disclosed the connection between Bolsonaro supporter Senator Messias de Jesus and the health crisis that caused the death of at least 570 children in Roraima's Yanomami indigenous land. According to the study, the former coordinator of Yanomami Indigenous Health District, Rómulo Pinheiro de Freitas, has close links with the former defender of mining on indigenous lands and member of the Senate Commission Messias de Jesus. The Federal Public Ministry said that the poor management of indigenous health was a determining factor in the humanitarian crisis affecting the indigenous peoples of Roraima. He also pointed out that there was a lack of anti-parasite medicine for children. Let's take a short break, but first, remember you can follow us on TikTok at teleSUR English, in which you will be able to see news in different formats, news updates, and much more. Other stories coming up. Stay with us. Welcome back from the South. On Monday in Argentina, the Minister of Security of the Buenos Aires province, Sergio Berni, was physically assaulted when he arrived at the protest that a group of bus drivers were carrying out in the town of Lomas de Mirador, in the district of La Matanza. The workers, who have been demanding for years more security in their working hours, were protesting against the crime of the bus driver Daniel Barrientos, killed on Monday in a robbery. When approaching the protest to speak, the minister was attacked with sticks, stones, and fist blows by the demonstrators. The minister had to be evacuated by infantry of the city police amid heavy police repression. According to Telam agency, a young man was arrested for the murder of Barrientos downtown on Monday morning. The crime occurred in the same neighborhood where Leandro Alcaraz, another driver of the same line 620, had already been murdered in 2018. In Argentina, the 6th Federal Court of Buenos Aires begins a third trial for crimes against humanity committed in the clandestine detention center for torture and extermination called Puente 12. 4 former members of the Buenos Aires police and 2 former officers of the Army's 601st Intelligence Battalion are tried for crimes committed between 1974 and 1977 that resulted in the death of 185 people. 3 of the accused are tried for the first time for crimes against humanity. More than 10 hearings are taking place in different provinces of the country, and the Secretary of Human Rights is a plaintiff in 2 out of 3 of these cases. More than 1,100 genocides have already been sentenced by the Argentinian justice system since the country's return to democracy. Donald Trump arrived at his New York skyscraper on Monday on the eve of his surrender to face unprecedented criminal charges that threaten to throw the entire 2024 White House race into turmoil. The 76-year-old Republican, the first U.S. president ever to be criminally indicted, will be formally charged on Tuesday over hush money paid to a porn star during the 2016 election that brought him to power. Trump will be arraigned in a Manhattan courthouse Tuesday afternoon local time, and is expected to try to use his appearance to rouse support for his re-election bid. Police in the city were on high alert with security cordons and Secret Service agents outside both Trump Tower and the court in Lower Manhattan. Mayor Eric Adams warned anyone protesting violently will be arrested and held accountable. Teachers in the United Kingdom announced on Monday that they will resume strike action for better pay on April 27th and May 2nd, following their rejection of a recent pay offer, the National Education Union said. According to the union, the offer included a lump sum of €1,000 this year and a 4.3% increase in 2024. However, 98% of the members of the union rejected this proposal as they considered it insulting, unacceptable, and not understanding of the shortage of personnel in the schools and the high inflation that increases the cost of living. For his part, UK Prime Minister Rishi Sunak considered the news of the new protest dates as extremely disappointing after the proposed agreement, in his opinion, was very reasonable. The British head of government added that the upcoming demonstrations will be hugely damaging to their children, whose education has already suffered because of COVID-19. 2 people were killed and 1 is missing on Monday's sinking of a fishing boat off the northern coast of Spain, while the other 7 crew members were rescued, regional authorities announced. The Villa Boa Uno, with 10 crew members on board, went down early Monday morning, 6 nautical miles north of Santander, the capital of the Cantabria region, the Spanish Rescue Service reported on Twitter. 7 have been rescued, there is 1 missing and 2 dead, the regional president of Cantabria, Miguel Ángel Revilla, said on the social network, who lamented this new misfortune at sea. One of the deceased is Spanish and the other Ghanaian, and the missing person is of Peruvian nationality, said the delegate of the central government in Cantabria, Ainhoa Quiñones, to local media. The Director General of the International Atomic Energy Agency, Rafael Grossi, will visit the Russian enclave of Kaliningrad on April 5th to discuss the safety of the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. Russia's permanent representative to the international organizations based in Vienna, Mikhail Ulyanov, confirmed that Grossi's exchange will be with a delegation sent by the Kremlin. The Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, considered the largest in Europe, is located in an area controlled by the Russian army in southwestern Ukraine. On February 24, 2022, Russia began the special military operation in Ukraine with the mission to protect the inhabitants of Donbass. Following the military advance, Russian forces arrived in Zaporizhzhia and established in March of that year a security ring around the nuclear power plant facilities to prevent Ukrainian shelling. teleSUR English continues to grow. You can now tune in from 33 different African countries through StarSat. Dial 461 and enjoy Latin American alternative broadcasts. One final short break and we'll be right back. Don't go away. Welcome back from the South. On Monday, China is preparing maneuvers at a higher level than those carried out days ago in response of Taiwan's leader Tsai Ing-wen possible meeting with the Speaker of the U.S. House of Representatives, Kevin McCarthy. Experts assure that the People's Liberation Army is preparing an operation similar to the one carried out last August when Nancy Pelosi, McCarthy's predecessor, was in Taipei. China's naval and air commandos would carry out massive live-fire drills around the southern island if the U.S. congressman finally meets Tsai Ing-wen on Wednesday in Los Angeles on her return trip from Belize and Guatemala. China demanded last week that Washington demonstrate with concrete actions the fulfillment of its commitment not to support Taiwan's independence aspirations. Japan is distancing itself from the United States and the European Union and is buying Russian oil above the $60 per barrel. Last December, the European Union and the United States agreed to set a limit on the price of Russian oil at $60 per barrel. This pact, still in force, is part of the retaliation against Moscow for the Ukrainian conflict, also agreed by the G7 countries, including Japan. Barely 4 months after this agreement, the Wall Street Journal reports that Japan broke this agreement and began to buy Russian oil above the limit of $60 per barrel. All this is happening at a time when Russia is redirecting its exports to Asia to counteract the sanctions imposed. This scenario coincides with another delicate moment. Several countries of the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries announced that last Sunday unexpected voluntary cuts in their production and withdraw crude oil from the market. Palestinians gathered in Nablus on Monday to mourn the death of 2 militants killed by Israeli forces in a morning raid in the occupied West Bank city. Israeli forces shot dead 2 Palestinians on Monday in an early morning raid in the occupied West Bank, the Palestinian Health Ministry said in what the army described as anti-terrorist activity. The raid came 2 days after a spike in violence in which 2 people were killed in clashes with Israeli forces and with fears of an escalation of the conflict during the Muslim holy month of Ramadan. In recent months, Israeli forces have carried out a series of deadly raids in the flashpoint town of Nablus. Since the beginning of the year, the Palestinian-Israeli conflict has claimed the lives of 90 Palestinians.
He wanted and he got it. He loved his country and his land. He loved his homeland and all matters. He used to struggle and resist. In every confrontation he was present and resisted. May God be pleased with him. Muhammad hated the enemy, and throughout his life he wished for martyrdom, and God be praised, he got it.
In Brazil, the week against Israeli apartheid ended with a total of 32 activities in the continent in solidarity with the struggle of the Palestinian people. According to local media, the weekend mobilization, which was organized by the Boycott, Divestment and Sanctions movement, seeks justice and respect for the Palestinians' human rights. The events were also linked with the fight against racism, oppression and discrimination around the world. Protesters assured that they will not allow Brazil to be a trade link for Israeli apartheid. Indian opposition leader Rahul Gandhi has lodged an appeal against his defamation conviction, hoping to overturn a judgment that resulted in his expulsion from parliament. According to Gujarat State's Surat City accepted his petition on Monday and posted for hearing on April 13th. The 52-year-old scion of the Nehru Gandhi family and leader of the Congress Party was found guilty of defamation by the Surat court over comments he made in a speech in 2019. India's parliament disqualified the political leader after the sentencing, as the law that governs elections in India mandates disqualification of any lawmaker who is convicted of any offense and sentenced to imprisonment for not less than 2 years. Gandhi said his disqualification from parliament was because he had been asking Prime Minister Narendra Modi what he called tough questions over his relationship with Gautam Adani, founder of the Adani conglomerate. A fall in local currencies, salary arrears payments, and war spending have pushed up prices in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, leaving locals struggling to afford basics. According to official figures and money changers, the Congolese franc has depreciated about 15% against the US dollar since the beginning of the year, hitting the poorest the hardest. Several people have told journalists that prices had risen much higher, in some cases doubling or even more. The price hikes follow increased government spending to battle the M23 rebel group, which has captured swaths of territory in eastern Congo since last year. According to the World Bank, about 2/3 of the 100 million people in the Democratic Republic of the Congo live on less than $2.10 a day.
There is a law of supply and demand. If there is an increase in the quantity of the market, there is also a lot of demand. Directly, there will be an increase in prices. So there is a demand for dollars. Everyone comes to ask for dollars, and then the money supply is too strong for the Congolese franc.
We have come to the end of this news brief. You can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. You can also join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Telegram, and TikTok. For TeleSUR English, I'm Luis Alberto Matos. Thank you for watching.